everybody, it's Romania Black, and I feel like such a traitor because I watched episode 1 of the Millionaire Detective Balance Unlimited, and I thought to myself, who are these voice actors? They sound familiar. Who is the voice actors playing these two main leads? And I could have sworn that I knew Daisuke's voice actor. No, his name is Onuki, and he's actually the only role that he's played that I am somewhat even familiar with is he's a character on Yowamushi Pedal. I've never watched that series, but I know what it is. And he's a character in the live-action Lupin the Third movies. But other than that, he's done a lot of live-action roles. This is one of the very few anime roles he's done, which is interesting, which is not unheard of. I'm watching Vinland Saga right now, and Arnheid's voice actress is a drama actress that's more known for live action than she is anime. So totally realistic, totally fine. I mean, I think even Ryuk's actor on Death Note was like a famous theater actor that just did Ryuk because it fit the part. But speaking of Death Note, I was like, who is Kato? Who's Haru? Who is he? How did I not realize he was Miyano Mamoru? How? I think because his character looks homely. I think because Haru doesn't look like, normally the sex pot characters that Miyano normally plays. Miyano Mamoru usually plays like a sleek debonair. Like, even if it's somebody like Light Yagami, they're at least like suave and charismatic. And Kato Haru is like the apple pie version of that. Like, he's the most far removed character I've ever seen Miyano Mamoru play. So it completely threw me off, but before this episode started, I couldn't wait. After watching episode 1, I was like, I gotta go ahead and watch episode 2. I couldn't wait for the comments on Patreon or YouTube. And so I was like, well, I'll just look up and see who's the voice actors for Haru and for Daisuke. And it's Miyano Mamoru and this guy Onuki. I was like, oh my gosh, they're the only two I looked up. So I'm sure I'll get comments about all the other voice actors, but they're the only two I looked up because I didn't want to be spoiled by any character names or anything like that. But yeah, I was so fascinated by that last episode as a pilot that I was like, well, I've got to watch more now. I've got to see, right? And we've only got 11 episodes. This is a given length series of 11 episodes. Why couldn't they just make it 12? But, it's only 11 episodes, so I'm like, all right, I got to know what is going to happen now that Daisuke has joined this detective division that Haru has been demoted to. We don't know the situation, so we got to wait and see what that's going to be like. But I'm so intrigued. I'm so intrigued by the concept of this guy who has all the money, who seems to not have a care in the world, but secretly has a dark past. We have an understanding that he has a misunderstood past. And that there's something more with Daisuke that he's not revealing, right? Whereas Haru seems pretty like, he even though we don't know the circumstance behind his demotion, he seems pretty emotional and like wears himself on his sleeve. So the dynamic between Daisuke and Haru is fascinating so far. And now that I know that Miyano Mamoru's in this, I was like, I need to know. I feel like Wushin Swoobian or somebody has told me that Miyano Mamoru was in this, and I just didn't put 2 and 2 together in the last episode. But now it's something to look forward to, so I'm really excited, y'all. Very excited to see how that goes down. So, want to give a quick shout out over to Patreon before we start this video to say a special thanks to patrons, not only in the first 2 tiers that I have, but also the philanthropy tier. If you're a member of the philanthropy tier, you not only get to vote in the polls, you get things a week early than YouTube, but also you get to break any ties that we have in the polls, and you get a special shout out in these videos. So, I just wanted to thank the people in the philanthropy tier because y'all mean so much for being supportive, as does everyone on Patreon and YouTube. I couldn't do this without you all. So those of you on Patreon, no matter what your tier is, I'm very appreciative of all that you do because I couldn't afford to do this without y'all. So thank you all so much. I enjoy doing it, and you guys giving me some sort of contribution is insanely generous. And I'm very, very grateful. But a special shout out to the philanthropy tier who go above and beyond with Edgar, with Dana, with Nameless Monster, with Tyrone, with Shimoyama, with Be Happy, with Translucent Men, with Eric, with Sunspots, as well as with Dana and Alex Cornejo. Thank you all so much. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. But yeah, I'm really excited, y'all. I don't know what to expect, but we'll see, right? The pilot episode was a very case closed type of deal where we had a single event happen, we solved the mystery, and then we ended it with with Haru being like, what the F, and Daisuke being like, yes, the F. So I'm really excited, and the OP has many promising things about it, so I'm very curious to see what we'll get out of that. But with that being said, we are not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive right into this episode and see what we get. So we are going to start The Millionaire Detective Balance Unlimited, episode 2. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. I am very pleasantly surprised by this episode. Very pleasantly surprised. Oh my gosh. We get a lot more into Daisuke than I had originally anticipated. And we also get a lot more into Kato as well. But man, I realize now why Kato's character threw me off being Miyano Mamoru. Haru Kato is not the type of character I would ever peg Miyano Mamoru for playing. He's not debonair. He's not suave. He's not charming. I mean, there is a charm to Kato, don't get me wrong. But he's just so homely in a lot of ways. And he's so down to earth and kind of like straight-laced. And it just, he's straight-laced like how Light Yagami is straight-laced. But Light Yagami is so charismatic and smooth. And Kato is like a little frizzball. He is not that. So this is a very different character. And he's not flamboyant like Miyano Mamoru has played with characters. He's not flamboyant. He's not over the top. He's not just exuding this god complex like Light Yagami. He's a very nonchalant, and I say nonchalant, he gets pretty emotional and like he emotes, but he's very down to earth and very subtle. And that's not what I think of when I think of Miyano Mamoru. So throughout this episode, I was listening to his voice, and there are moments where I'm like, yeah, that sounds like Miyano Mamoru. But there's a lot of other moments that I'm like, this doesn't sound like him at all. And I know he plays a character in Uramichi Onisan, and I really want to see that series eventually. And I am sure that character, because it's very slice of life realistic, is going to sound more like this character. But what works really good, what I realized throughout this episode, is Daisuke Kanbei's character, being played by an actual TV actor, like a film actor. One thing that kind of makes it really interesting is that his cadence and the way that Daisuke's voice actor portrays his character is very, not monotone, but it's very low key, very subtle, very simple. And then that parallels very well with Miyano Mamoru's voice acting, which can be emotive and expressive when it needs to be. So I really appreciate they cast 2 voice actors who are so different, but I feel like that's going to make their characters play off of each other really well. And then we even get the girl. She is related to Kanbei. We don't know how. I'm going to go back and watch the episode again and see if they tell us if it's his sister or not. But she's definitely from the house of Kanbei. I feel like it's RuPaul's Drag Race. From the house of Kanbei, we have Suzui, who is related somehow to Daisuke. So she's not a love interest that we know of. Because you would think if she was married or like a girlfriend, he would have announced that. But no, instead she's a relative. So that's interesting. Now, will Kato maintain a crush on Suzui, or is it going to... What I love about this is it's very much the stereotypical BL kind of trope where it's like, we don't like each other, even though we're kind of, maybe more similar than we think, or opposites attract. Like, it's very much that thing where you don't think they're going to be... The question for me is it going to be a contextual BL, or is there actually going to be elements? Because I'm not going to lie, the only thing I knew about this series going in was there was 2 characters, obviously Kato and Daisuke, that I saw on Twitter constantly getting paired up. And so I'm like, okay, is this going to be like, are we talking like Skate the Infinity levels of BL subtext? Or are we talking like, where it's just kind of like, not really, but you can make that assumption if you want to. So I guess we'll find out. I don't want to know outright. We've only got 9 episodes left, if you can believe it. So I'm sure I'll figure out eventually. But yeah. This is a really interesting episode because it kind of does a little bit of a 180 from last week, which I thought was interesting. It does a 180 in a lot of ways and goes a different route with Kato and Daisuke than I thought they were and that I thought the show was going to go. And it touches on some interesting themes and builds some interesting questions that we can carry into the next couple of episodes. So going back through this, I like that Kato immediately is like, I cannot work with Daisuke. He's like, in Kato's mind, Daisuke is out. He's like, no, he just has money that he flaunts in front of him. He's not the type of person that I want to be working with. He doesn't represent my type of justice as a cop. And then the manager's like, he's just sitting there making his boat. He's like, well, you don't have to be his mentor, but I'm sure he'll be fine by himself. I just figured, you'd want to do it because you're responsible and whatever. He's just sitting there building his ship. Building a literal ship. If he builds a ship between the two of them, I swear. That would be great. But yeah, he's just sitting there building his ship. And what gets me is that Kato doesn't seem to think that anybody realizes the problem of Daisuke being there. Like, Kato is from the get-go not wanting Daisuke to be down there in the department with them. Whether he thinks that Daisuke thinks he's too good for them, or he feels like maybe he's the same type of cop as the First Division, which is what he was demoted from. Regardless of what the reason is, Kato doesn't want him down there. But nobody else seems to care that Daisuke's there. They're just all welcoming, and Kato is the judgmental one, right? And he's just like, oh, well, I guess if he has to be here. And then in walks Daisuke. But what's interesting is, from the last episode, I guess it's not surprising that Kato is judgmental of Daisuke. After all, he did let him fall from the top of a bridge into, like, water hundreds of meters down. Makes sense. But what I love about it is that Daisuke walks in. He doesn't act like he's better than anybody. He doesn't, like, show up the manager and, like, come in and start snapping his fingers and telling people what to do. Not at all. He doesn't seem to judge anyone right off the bat, which is not what I thought was going to happen. Because when he's with Kato in the first episode, he seems a little bit judgy up there on the top of the bridge looking down at him like, okay, peasant, then just let him go. I had my mind made up that he was going to be like this, prick. But no, Daisuke comes in, nods, sits down, and immediately the girl that works there comes up and she's like, oh, hey, would you like one? It's the gummy fish are brand new. Like, she just comes up with these gummy fish, and you could see someone, I know people at work that are like her, that are like, I have someone that I work with that's like, oh my God, have you seen this? Like, look at this, check out this new thing. Like, I work with someone who's exactly like her. And it would be so easy to write Daisuke's character off as being snobby or a prick, because I kind of wrote him off that way in the last episode of how he was going to act. And here, he completely goes against that stereotype right off the bat by not, making fun of her or scoffing at her gummy fish. He immediately takes one from her, like, politely, right? And she said, oh, a sea bream, a lucky start to the day. Like, of course he gets the lucky fish, right? Of course he gets the one that's lucky. And I love that he holds it up like he's evaluating it, like, oh, it's this gummy. But he doesn't ever judge her or chide her for it, right? I felt like with the gummy fish, it felt like a Swedish fish moment. If you don't know what Swedish fish are, they are a snack in the U.S. of these fish that kind of look like the fish that Daisuke gets. They are tasteless and garbage. I can't, they're really gross. I don't like Swedish fish at all. There's some people that love that snack. Ugh. I'm like, nope, they taste like the bottom of a fish tank. No. But yeah. And so then, in the midst of her sharing her gummies, Kamai, he freaks out, and Kato's telling him to calm down, and he says she died from a drug overdose, the model, Akiko Hoshida. And of course, that's when Kato's like, whoa, seriously? I love Kamai's face where he's like, the way they animated him, it was funny. Centerfold model Akiko Hoshida dies from an overdose. And she kind of looks like Suzui a little bit. And Kamai says, Kato, she was your favorite, wasn't she? Why are we learning all about this through the media? Because information doesn't get passed on to us. So that is in that one line that says so much, that they're in this bottom of the barrel task force to the point where they're part of the police department, but they're so far at the bottom of the ladder that news, like random news about a centerfold model, doesn't even make it to them before it makes it to the paper. So, which, TMZ and some media outlets, they're faster than the cops to find out info. So, I mean, I wouldn't think it would be too much of an insult. But yeah, and I like that in this moment, we kind of play up, Kamai suggests that Kato has a type. He's like, oh, she's your favorite model, right? And she kind of looks like Suzui. So he's playing up the idea that he has a type of, tall, dark, and mysterious, which could apply to Suzui or Daisuke. Could apply to either one. And I love that Daisuke's just sitting there chewing on the fish, just not saying a dang word. And so Kato's like, I'm heading over to stop the shoplifting campaign right now. And they're like, okay, we're counting on you. And so he takes off to go do this shoplifting campaign or whatever, and Daisuke immediately follows him. And Kato's like, I don't want you following me. I love that Daisuke kind of looks like a puppy dog, like following him, like, hey, I'm coming with you. And Kato's like, I don't need you. It's, again, not an action that I thought Daisuke would take. And he's like, I'm going with you. And he's like, I'm fine by myself. And he stops and he's like, so don't follow me. And he says, take me to the scene, Inspector Kato. And I love Kato's face where he's like, are you calling me senpai? What is this? Like, he gets so flustered because he, innately wants to be polite and supportive because that's just his nature. But he also doesn't like Daisuke's character because he's the type to throw money at everything. So it's just this conflict of, do I be polite and take him because he's being polite? Or do I stick to my guns and tell him to screw off because I don't like the way he does things? And he ends up taking him with him. So yeah, interesting. I feel like with the OP, I'm going to be looking at it constantly. I feel like it evolves as the series goes, but maybe it doesn't. So they're in Shinjuku, right, at the station. And they run across, I wanted to go back to this scene because this scene was rather interesting. And so these guys are like, this is Red Panda. And so these two are like doing this comedy sketch, right? But they're not really doing, like, everybody's walking by kind of like, what the hell? Like, they're not doing a very good job, right? So I'm like, were they waiting for a drug deal to take place? And they were just doing random shit until they showed up? And so they're sitting there punching him. And then that's when Daisuke says, where are we? As he has all the equipment there. He's like, can it be Earth? All right, I'm finally communicating with Earth. And Kato says, these guys are desperate to survive too. And that's when they put the note in the hat. And so, Kato, stops and watches the comedy show. And Daisuke's like, what are you doing? And he's like, hey, these guys are just two comedians trying to make it in the world. I'm just appreciating the craft that they're giving. And Daisuke throws him the $10,000 note. And Kato says, money doesn't buy everything. It doesn't solve everything. But he's like, and he says, by performing where people can see, they're improving their skills. I like that Kato tries to school Daisuke, and we get a little bit more into his personality and his, philosophy. Because he's like, hey, don't just throw money at something. He's like, these guys need to learn. They need to hone their craft because you're not always going to be around to give them money. So they need to, learn how to do things without you just pandering to them, right? And they say it's a $10,000 bill. And they're like, let's go drinking. And he's like, sure. And then Kato says, your money took away their willingness for labor. Like, you throwing money at it just took away them wanting to work and their motivation. And I'm like, Kato, what the hell? Like, he's trying to be this life philosophical coach for Daisuke. And so they go, and he's like, are you listening to me? And Daisuke is not. I also love that their eyes are polar opposites. We have the golden eyes of Kato. We have the steel blue eyes of Daisuke. It's great. And that's when he says, mescaline, right? And they turn around. And he's like, and they caught him. So the question is, how did they catch him with the mescaline? Like, how did he know what to say? That part is still a little confusing to me. Like, how did he catch them? How did him giving the notes to him, catch them in the act? Because I don't think they mentioned where they were going. So how did he use that to catch them? I'm sure you all will note down in the comments below how that was possible. But that part is a little confusing to me. And so the next day they're interrogating them. And Daisuke's trying to figure out where they got the drugs from. He's like, where did you buy it? Where did you get the drugs? And so what's interesting is that he has these glasses. He's like, where did you buy it? And he says, about a week ago. What time? 9 o'clock or thereabout. And so that's when he starts going through the stuff. So he analyzes, I want to go back to this. So he analyzed this where Kanbei's heart rate is 60, which is a little low. I'm like, dude, you might want to check that out. But he does the scan of this contactless smart card, and we get the results where it's talking about going to Shinjuku. And he's like, you've been inside Shinjuku a lot. And Roppongi, we find out that they were in Shinjuku for most of the time, but they were at Roppongi for at least part of it. And so it says April 8th. So this is around April when this is taking place. Yes, Wednesday. So this is taking place in April. And it says Keiichi, search result, Keiichi Yamada, nationality Japan, Sendai City, male, 27 of the 15th of September 1993. And then his heart rate is like 118, 120. So it's like elevated, right? Because he's getting nervous, right? Them damn glasses are something else. They're like, this is like Bruce Wayne level of technology, and I love it. He says, you bought this in Roppongi. Who was the dealer? But he won't say. And then he asks, how much do you want to spill the beans? I'll buy the information at the price you name. It'll be worthless unless you speak up before your partner. And he's like, we've been a team together for 10 years. I can't betray him. But he ends up betraying him, right? So, which is so fascinating. And then Kato, when he comes out of the interrogation room, he's like, how's it going? And he says, it's about money in the end. And so Kato knows, he's like, how pathetic it is. He says, getting confessions out is all about two hearts colliding. So again, Kato very much believes that interrogating and being a cop is getting to the heart of the matter, like connecting with someone personally and intimately, and that's how you get your information. And he's saying that Daisuke is awful because he's not doing any of that at all. He's just throwing money to somebody and getting the results that he wants without digging into the heart and soul of the matter. And so he makes this big, speech about it to Kamai. And that's when he says he should totally get lessons from Cho-san. And Cho-san is the one in the other interrogation room who says he doesn't care about scum like him. But when I think about your mama who raised you all on her own, I can't bear it. So I kind of love that we get Cho and Daisuke doing very different means of interrogation, and they're both effective. So I like that thematically. It's showing us, the audience, that yes, Daisuke goes about it his own way. It's effective, but Cho does the more heart-to-heart method, and it works as well. So neither is superior to the other, but Kato can't see that. Kato, I think, gets a little bit jealous and thinks that maybe Daisuke gets things handed to him easier because all he does is throw money at the problem and then he gets what he wants. I think Kato is so used to having to work really hard to get the results that he gets that when somebody just comes along and throws a wad of cash down and gets that same result, he's like, well, you didn't have to work for it. So I can kind of see where Kato's coming from. But what makes Daisuke so interesting as a character is, like I said, at this point, he's not snobby. In the last episode, he kind of was. So he has that in him to be so, but he's not a one-note character. Daisuke, for being as quiet as he is, surprisingly has a lot of nuance and has more to him than I expected for the second episode, which is encouraging. I'm really all about that. But yeah, Cho's strategy works. It gets him to confess. And again, we talked about this in Trigun, and now I'll mention it here, but him having like the Spike Seagal, like just yellow shirt and blue or black tie, it seems it's an interesting reference, right? But he has like different hair. And so they mean Isazaki. And they're like, that's the model, Yuta Isazaki, who wears the same clothes everywhere he goes. He wears that same purple and yellow outfit everywhere. If I'm being honest, you know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of Seiya from Tsurune. If Seiya became a drug-dealing model, this is where he would be. And I love that Cho is the veteran cop, but he's not going to go on any long stakeouts, right? He did his interrogation. Now he's like, okay, Kato, I'm going to leave you and Kame in charge of this. And then we find out that Daisuke got the same results and doesn't seem to care that he used money to get it. So yeah, so they do the stakeout. And Kato reveals that he does have connections outside the police force. And one of them is Mita, who is a freelance journalist for an entertainment section, which is a great resource to have because he knows all the celebrity gossip, has all the ins and outs, works out pretty good, right? And so he's the one that has all the information. He's an entertainment journalist. And he knows Kato because back in the day, he was in bad company and Kato got him out of it and scolded him scolded him and got him out of trouble. So he owes him. And I like that Kato gets really like kind of, chummy about this a little bit, he doesn't get gloat worthy for it, but he kind of gets proud of himself where he's like, oh, don't you think that's I got this freelance journalist by being kind and connecting with his hearts and showing him the right path. And Daisuke's like, okay. Like, just doesn't have much of a response to it. And then we get them eating the ramen, and Daisuke's never ate ramen before. I love that. I love that Kato's just like, seriously, you've never had ramen? What? It's really funny. And so then they all get out their cameras. Mita has the big camera. Kato has like the personal one. And then I love that Daisuke has the professional glasses that can read everything. And he's like, Misato too. They're certified centerfold models for Millennium Entertainment. So we find out something is afoot with him gathering all the models together for like the drug party that they're having. Right? And so then we see the black-haired girl who's his favorite. And what's interesting here is Daisuke doesn't say a word. He doesn't say, oh, that's my sister, or she's worth me, or anything. Doesn't say a single word, right? Which I find fascinating. He keeps that close to the vest. And then that's when Mita tells Kato, he says, you like girls who look more pure and innocent, right? And Kato has a clear crush on her. Yeah, that's interesting. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of Bungo Stray Dogs, where you have the Octogawa siblings and you have Higuchi, and Higuchi has a crush on one or both of the siblings. That's what's reminding me of. I'm like, wow, this is a very similar situation. But yeah, he's sitting there all blushy faced, and what's so fascinating is he's doing it right in front of her brother or family. So, But I love that the episodes are called checks, like check 2, write the check. And this one's called Love Does Much, Money Does Everything, which is fascinating because it kind of ties to the themes of the episode where Kato is convinced that you need to create these bonds and these connections in order for things to work out, whereas Daisuke is just throwing money to it. And Daisuke turns out to be more than adequate in their beliefs in this episode. But I think the important thing to come out of it is that they're both right. Like, love and money are both needed to be successful in this world. And they kind of both prove that, right? And so what's interesting as well is that, like, Suzui is not afraid to get down and dirty. Like, she is, like, getting it on with the model. And Kato's like, oh my gosh, what's the scandal? And Mita's like, you really are innocent. Which, again, throws me off from Miyano Mamoru because I'm not used to Miyano playing, like, an innocent kind of, like, prudish character at all. And so that's so fascinating to me. That he's just like, you're too innocent. He's like, I can't take photos. He's like, shut up. But then in the back, there's Daisuke. And what I like about this scene is at the time, Daisuke looked really bored and uninterested in what was going on. Because you're just like, oh, this is just not up his alley. No, he's in the back seat not taking photos because that's his literal family that's, floozing it up with this model for the sake of finding information. So he's clearly uncomfortable about it, right? He seems very uncomfortable, like he doesn't want to acknowledge it. And that's when we see the drug deal go down. And the thing about it is now it makes sense too, because Kato wanted to immediately like rush out and like book him. Like, let's get him. Let's get the girl. Let's get the guy. Let's do this. Let's bust them all for the drugs. It makes sense now that Daisuke, one, didn't want to bust them because his family's there. They'll get in trouble. But also, he explains that we're not going to catch the mastermind if we don't. We need to let him go long enough to catch the mastermind. And I think that Daisuke was comfortable with that because his relative Suzui was there. Otherwise, he would not have been comfortable doing it, I don't think. But I think the whole reason she was there was what kept him from stopping Kato. And he's like, how do you know all of this? And now we know how he knows all of it. It's not just the glasses. It's because Suzui's been getting him information. All makes sense now. And again, Daisuke doesn't tell Kato. He plays everything close to the vest. And so we cut to the next scene where Kato, who is stubborn to a fault, refuses to go with Kanbei and Mita and says he'll do the stakeout on his own. And we don't get that told to us, but it's my dog playing with the dog's toys. We don't get that told to us, but we can see it through him being the only one in the car with the ramen watching in the stakeout. And we cut from him to Mita and them. And the noodle bowl, it says Kanbei noodles. I love that. Oh my God, they have their own food chain. Because of course they do. I love that we cut from Kato eating like just the ramen and noodles he got at the grocery store for like 80 cents to this like beautiful noodle bowl with like eggs and ham and everything. It looks absolutely delicious. And Mita's like, oh hell yes. I love these, like, yes. And Daisuke's like, we have our own personal chef. This is interesting because it looks like there's a bed in the back, like it's a little dorm and everything, like its own personal room. And he's just looking out over the scenery to see. And then we see the sister like getting the drugs and everything from him. And I just love the close-up of Kato sipping the drink, like trying with the camera to like get all the information. Bless him. I love Kato. He's such a ham. Bless him. And then yeah, he's a zombie the next day because he's been on the stakeout. I love that everybody tells them that he needs to take a bath. Everybody's like, hey, look, if you want to take a shower here, you can. You don't have to keep going without bathing. But I do get some serious Buddy Daddy vibes from this show. And this show came out before Buddy Daddy, so it should be the opposite. But the guy that's the boss reminds me a lot in his looks of Kazuki, which is kind of hilarious. And the woman in black is the liaison. And so he chooses, when he sees the girl leave, he chooses to follow her. And Suzui is kind of a badass already because she's like driving this car like a bat out of hell. She's flying a helicopter. She's a mechanic. I'm like, hell yes. I love female characters when they can be both badass but also show like a glamorous side. I love that because usually it's stereotypical where if a girl is like really super like strong and tough, they're given like more masculine qualities, and that's fine because there are women like that. But I like the fact that the show is making her character both very beautiful and sexy and alluring, but she's also tough and can get the job done. Like I like that already about Suzui. I like her character and how it's set up. She's kind of like a lady of all trades, a Jill of all trades. But yeah, he shows up thinking it's a hotel. No! It is Daisuke's home. I thought for a hot second, before we realized that she was the relative, I thought maybe she was the mastermind behind it all, which she kind of is because she's here. But I thought that she was like the drug dealer. Like she wasn't the liaison, she was the drug dealer. And we were going to like her mafia mansion and then it was all going to come out in the wash. But then we find out, no, it's Daisuke's relative. And their swanky ass house with the falcons on the gate as you roll in. There's also like twin gardens, like everything's symmetrical. And then yeah, Daisuke shows up and he's like, what are you doing here? Like we're out in the middle of nowhere. Why are you here? And he's like, that's my line. And then I love that Daisuke and Suzui, both of them acknowledge that he smells, but neither of them tell him because they're like, they don't want to insult him. They're just like, I mean, you could take a bath. I love that Daisuke just kind of has like this judgmental look like, dude, why do you stink? What's the deal? And then, yeah, the green glow, all the gold. It's very Oz-like. Because Kato's like, is this like a restaurant for members only? And he asks if he's hungry. And he's like, oh, well, that's not what I meant. And he tells the butler, prepare meals for two. Prepare meals for two. Suzui was not invited, right? And I love that even afterwards, Suzui's like, aren't you going to eat with him? Like, if Suzui ends up being like their biggest cheerleader and cheerleads for Kato and Daisuke, I will be all for this. If she like ends up becoming a wing woman, I'll be like, hell yes, please. But yeah, as you wish. And so yeah, they take the elevator down to the Bruce Wayn basement. I love that Kato is so oblivious. He's like, this is a rather pompous joint. I'm like, it's his home. And then yeah, Daisuke is still being polite and is like, he's like, Oh God, he stinks, but I don't want to tell him. Again, I was really expecting, because in the first episode, Kato is so straight-laced. Now, granted, when you look at Kato, he's disheveled, he hasn't bathed in days, and he's got bags under his eyes. The guy is like at his limit, so maybe that's contributing to his bad attitude. But for the first episode, I thought that Kato would be a lot more polite and kind of be like, try to be the bigger man and be like, well, I just won't let him get me down. But instead, he's kind of having like full-on panic mode all the time. And Daisuke is the polite and quiet one that I wasn't expecting. So that's so interesting to me. And then, yeah, he's like, he tells him where they're getting the drugs from. And he's like, their liaison, the woman with black hair, entered this place. And then he sees like everything out here. And we see like the bear suit. We see everything being set up in this episode. And Kato just doesn't put two and two together. He's like, what is this place? The woman with black hair. Yeah. He's like, she's been together with Isazaki all the time lately. And he's like, an armored vehicle? Why do we have something like this? And that's when we see her. And he's like, oh, and notices the earring and everything. Mm-hmm. You must be Mr. Kato. My name is Suzui Kanbei. And he's like, Kanbei? Like, what? And then realizes, is this your house? And it's like, yes, it is. But they don't ever say if she's his sister or not, but I'm assuming she is, because they look eerily similar once you get to see them side by side. And Kato's just like, what is happening? What is this? He sees like Patrol Coon. He says, why don't you use this occasion to crush them all at once? And he's like, hold on. What do you mean crush? More like, what the hell are you all doing? And she's like, I've been doing undercover work against Isazaki under Daisuke's orders. They're essentially controlled by the deputy godfather, Umezu. Once you apprehend him, everything will collapse sooner or later. There'll be a drug party, and he'll be attending as well. And so she's like, looks like all the centerfold models and actresses that he rounded up are going to be attending. And whose case was recent. And so Akihiko is going to be there. And he's like, if I have a 2 billion or so, I can arrest Umezu. So yeah, I was like that Daisuke's like, well, I've got the money, so we're planning on just going there and arresting him. It doesn't seem too hard. And that's when Kato's like, no! What's funny about this is that if Kato had just gone with Daisuke's plan from the start, then he wouldn't have got gassed and he wouldn't have gone through all of the trouble. If he just heard Daisuke out and went along with it, it could have saved him a lot of grief. But he's so determined to do things his way and prove that Daisuke's way is wrong that he ends up causing a lot of trouble for himself. Now in the background, there's something about, like, there's Abura, like, there, and then there's about the president in the background, like, crazy stuff happening. He's like, I couldn't gather enough about the party, I'll admit that. But I hate methods that involve slapping people with wads of money. Clearly, he's like, you can do as you please, I'm going to do things my way. And he turns to leave, and that's when Suzui says, oh, Mr. Kato, what about your meal? And if you wish, we can prepare a bath. She's like, if you want to bathe too. And he's just like, no, I'm fine. I'm still working. And she's like, oh, he seems like quite the serious fellow. And that's when she, like, references, like, the gun. Have a look at what I've made. Like, she's also an inventor. Girl. I like this scene because I was really wanting to ship Daisuke and Kato. And at first I was like, oh, is this girl that's coming in, like, is she going to be like an Irene Adler sort of character? Is she going to be, like, the wedge in between the two of them? But, like Buddy Daddies, she's not. She's actually a sibling of one of the main characters, so we think. And she's an inventor, and she's actually, because she didn't seem at all remotely interested in Kato. She was like, what a serious guy. Aren't you going to eat with my brother? Like, okay. Or take a bath? You know, Kato's first impression with her wasn't exactly the best. And I love that Daisuke shows, like, these little moments of him smiling. And she's like, look at what I made. And he's like, Like he's pleased by it. So he clearly, the smile he gave to Kato at the end of the last episode was not him being smug. It was him being pleased with what he saw. And Kato just, that, he's like us, the audience, that hasn't radiated yet. It hasn't like sunk in that that's what it was. So I'm like, okay. And so they find out that everybody has nicknames going into this party, right? Everyone is assigned nicknames, and he goes by the nickname Whiskey, right? I like that Mina's like, wait, maybe you shouldn't do this. But I like that Mina didn't spill the beans on the plan, because he's like, I've been told not to. And I'm sure Daisuke told him that Kato was going to do things his own way. And it's like, But yeah, he shows up saying that I am Whiskey. And the hat being too small makes total sense, because then we cut to him. We cut to the guy that's like locked up in the car that he beat up to get the clothes from and the card. And we see him like out in the van, and he clearly has the smaller head. So yeah, I like that. I like that Kato took this too small hat to sneak into the party. It looks ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And then him thinking he could take the bouncer. Like, I'm glad, because normally in anime, you know, the guy punches the other guy and he gets sent flying. Here, no, it doesn't work. It's very realistic in that, no, Kato he did not plan that out nearly as well as he could have. It was a great idea to sneak off with the phone, but did not go over so well. I also thought that the ball scene would last a lot longer than it did. I thought it was going to be like a whole big thing in this episode, and that Daisuke was going to show up like in a masquerade costume too. But no. And I love the reveal that it's Mita as Patrol Kun. I love that, because at first I was like, would Daisuke lower himself to being in a mascot costume? Probably not. Probably not. But instead it's Mita. And yeah, it's just the idea that Daisuke had this whole plan, and he's like, when will the deposit happen? Like, he asked Kato when the money is getting deposited, and Kato didn't know that this was all planned out. And I like that the Gatling, what it was like account search, brute force from the tower. They're like, the purchase of the tower is complete. And we see Kanbei, Daisuke's heart rate 72. Mm-hmm. And seeing them going after the like gas bombs. The balance is unlimited. And then, of course, Kato wasn't prepared for being gassed. But they managed to catch the criminal mastermind. Roughly 20 others were arrested for illegal drug possession. And they're like, and other crimes, like enough information about the murder of Akiko Oshida. And then yeah, poor Kato, he's just like exhausted back at the crime force place with the others. It's great. And so then Daisuke comes in and erases the name on there, showing up. And Kato's like, come with me. We're going to have a word out in the hallway. He's like, we may have solved that case, but it wasn't done the way that I liked it. And I love this last scene though. The lighting is so good. And him saying that I don't like the way that you're a cop. He's like, someone like you as a cop, I don't like it. And then that's when Daisuke says, well, why did you join the police? He says, to nab criminals, of course. Which I was expecting Daisuke to be like, well, that's what we're doing. So does the method truly matter in this case, as long as we're getting the job done? But Kato has a response. He says, but doing something like slapping people in the face with a wad of cash, I want to do it without doing that. Like, he keeps going back to that very same thing. And Daisuke says, I heard you used to be in the 1st Investigation Division, but during a siege, you misfired and the target was seriously injured. So we find out that Kato accidentally shot someone during a siege, and that person was seriously injured, and he couldn't forgive himself, so he wouldn't wield a gun again because of the PTSD, and instead was demoted to a department where you don't have to wield a gun. That's the thing. And we see the one guy there, it looks like Shirakawa, along with the other man. Mm-hmm. Yep, you've been unable to fire a gun ever since, and moved to modern crimes. And yeah, and Kato being like, you don't know me! Like, grabbing him. I love it. Because he grabs him and then said, you bastard. And then just walks away. And so that's when they say they're orders from above. And the funny thing is that I'm sure Daisuke already knew about the whole Hong Kong thing. So he's like, you're going to go to Hong Kong, right? There's a special symposium about international crime and we have to send someone. And Kato's like, I'm sure Kato at that point was thinking, sure, I don't mind anything to get away from Daisuke and the others. But no, that's not what happens. He's like, I'll ask Kanbei for the details. And he's like, wait, what? And I love the comedic timing of, what? What? And every time the scene changes and it gets more and more like towards the trip, he's like, sure, wait. And then it just shows him getting buckled in. And then he looks over, she's like, have a nice flight. And he's like, what? And you see Daisuke with the wine, with like the Moscato, and then flying off in his personal plane. I love it. I love it. So the damage this time around was, 83 billion yen. The costs incurred this episode. So, yeah, like I said, I really, really enjoyed this episode a lot. I really liked the fact that Daisuke is not a total prick. There's a lot more to him than meets the eye. He's playing things very close to the vest. We're not learning a lot about him at once, but we know he's basically Bruce Wayne. He has a relative. She's badass and awesome. I love Suzui already. And he very much, we still don't know about the whole Balance Unlimited, how that works, but he's on his way to the symposium and has asked Kato to come too. If Kato, you're looking at this all the wrong way. Daisuke's trying to get to know you. He's trying to learn about you. He's inviting you on an international date to Hong Kong in his private jet. You are looking about this the wrong way, sir. You are missing the forest for the trees. Oh my God. But I like that Kato, we learn why he's in the division that he is, why he's in modern crimes, and we learn a little bit more about his character, and he clearly has something against money being used as a manipulation thing. I'm sure we'll get more on that in the future, but I really like the development of these characters and what we're getting so far, so that's really exciting. But yeah, so y'all, I am so excited for episode 3. Hopefully I'll be able to see some comments before then, but in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I'm excited to see your comments down below. Please no spoilers, but I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I'll be back very soon with more The Millionaire Detective Balance Unlimited. Bye.